The storage unit key was small, just a brass piece of metal unremarkable in every way. It had been sitting in my grandmother's jewelry box for 11 years, tucked beneath costume pearls and tarnished brooches, forgotten by everyone including me. When I finally remembered it existed, when I finally drove to the facility on the outskirts of town and slid that key into the lock, I had no idea what I was about to find. My ex-husband Nathan had taken everything in the divorce. The house we'd built together, the cars we'd paid off together, custody of our two children, based on lies. I still couldn't believe the judge had accepted. He'd walked out of that courtroom with a smirk on his face and everything I'd ever loved, leaving me with a suitcase of clothes and exactly $432 in my checking account. He thought he'd won. Everyone thought he'd won. The neighbors whispered about poor Nathan, saddled with such an unstable wife. His mother posted on Facebook about how proud she was of her son for stepping up as a single father. Our mutual friends, who had somehow all become his friends during the divorce, sent him casseroles and sympathy while I moved into a studio apartment above a dry cleaner. I was 41 years old, and I had lost everything, except I hadn't. I just didn't know it yet. The storage unit door rolled up with a metallic screech, revealing stacks of boxes I hadn't seen in over a decade. My grandmother had rented this unit before she passed away, and I'd been paying the monthly fee ever since, never bothering to come check what was inside. $62 a month for 11 years, almost $8,000, paid automatically from an account I barely monitored, $8,000 I could have desperately used during my divorce. But as I stepped into that dusty space and began opening boxes, I realized that what was inside was worth infinitely more than what I'd spent to keep it. My grandmother had been a collector. That much I knew, but I had always assumed she collected junk, the kind of stuff old ladies accumulate without realizing it has no value. Costume jewelry, old magazines, souvenirs from trips she'd taken before I was born. What I found was not junk. The first box contained coins, not the kind you find in your couch cushions, the kind that come in protective cases with authentication certificates. Gold coins, silver coins, rare coins with dates that made my eyes widen as I researched them on my phone. The second box contained stamps, albums upon albums of stamps, organized meticulously, each one labeled in my grandmother's careful handwriting with its origin, date, and estimated value. The third box contained paintings, small ones, nothing that would hang in a museum, but signed by artists whose names I recognized, artists whose work sold at auction for amounts that made my head spin. And the fourth box, the one at the very back, buried beneath decades of dust, contained something even more valuable than all the rest combined: documents, legal documents, stock certificates, bonds, investment records, all in my grandmother's name, and all, according to her will, which was also in the box, left specifically to me. My grandmother had died when I was 30. I had been married to Nathan for 3 years at that point, and I remembered him insisting that we didn't need to worry about her estate. She was just a sweet old lady with a small pension, he'd said. Nothing worth pursuing. Too much paperwork for too little payoff. I had believed him. I had let him handle it. I had signed whatever he'd put in front of me and never questioned why he seemed so eager to close out her affairs. Now I understood why. My grandmother had been wealthy, not Rockefeller wealthy, but comfortable, very comfortable. And she had hidden her wealth in a storage unit because she didn't trust banks, didn't trust lawyers, and apparently didn't trust anyone except the granddaughter she'd left everything to, the granddaughter whose husband had made sure she never knew what she'd inherited. I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit, surrounded by boxes of treasure, and I laughed. I laughed until tears streamed down my face, until my stomach hurt, until I couldn't breathe. Nathan had taken the house. He'd taken the cars. He'd taken my children. But he hadn't taken this. He hadn't even known it existed. And now, finally, I had the resources to take everything back. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how I ended up divorced, destitute, and sitting in a storage unit discovering that my grandmother had been secretly wealthy. You need to understand who Nathan really was, and who I had been when I married him, and how 16 years of marriage had slowly eroded me into someone I didn't recognize. My name is Rosemary Chen. I'm 42 now, but this story starts when I was 25, young and naive and absolutely convinced that I had found my soulmate. I met Nathan Price at a friend's birthday party. He was handsome in a conventional way, with the kind of jaw and cheekbones that looked good in photographs. He had a confident manner that I mistook for strength. He had opinions about everything and expressed them with such certainty that I assumed he must be right. He was a financial advisor at a small firm in the city, not wealthy, but comfortable, stable, the kind of man my mother had always told me to look for, someone with a good job and a good head on his shoulders, someone who would provide. I was working as a graphic designer at a marketing agency, earning decent money and enjoying my independence. I had my own apartment, my own car, my own life. I wasn't looking for someone to provide for me. I was looking for a partner. Nathan seemed like a partner. At first, he asked thoughtful questions about my work. He remembered details I'd mentioned weeks earlier. He showed up with flowers for no reason and planned elaborate dates that made me feel special. He told me I was the most intelligent, most beautiful, most remarkable woman he'd ever met. Looking back, I can see the red flags I missed. The way he subtly criticized my friends until I stopped seeing them. The way he encouraged me to skip family dinners until my relationships with my parents grew distant. The way he always had an opinion about what I should wear, how I should style my hair, what I should order at restaurants. But at the time, I interpreted all of it as love. He was interested in every aspect of my life because he cared so deeply. He wanted to spend all his time with me because I was special. He had suggestions about my appearance because he wanted me to be my best self. I was 25. I didn't know that love wasn't supposed to feel like slowly disappearing. We got engaged after a year of dating. Married 6 months later. I moved into his apartment because it was bigger than mine. I merged my bank accounts with his because that's what married couples did. I put his name on everything I owned because we were a team now, and teams shared everything. My grandmother came to the wedding. She was 82 then, sharp as a tack but quiet in that way old women sometimes get when they've seen enough of the world to stop being surprised by it. She pulled me aside during the reception and pressed something into my hand. It was a key, small, brass, unremarkable. Keep this safe, she said. Don't tell your husband about it. Someday you might need it. I laughed and asked her what she meant. She just shook her head. I've been watching him, she said. He has hungry eyes. I've seen that look before. Just keep the key, Rosemary, and remember where to find what it opens. I didn't understand. My grandmother was old, and old people sometimes said strange things. I put the key in the jewelry box she'd given me for my 16th birthday and forgot about it. 5 years later, she was dead. Nathan handled the estate. I signed the papers, and I never thought about that key again. Not until I'd lost everything else. If you're enjoying this story, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. Because what comes next is where everything falls apart, and then, eventually, where it comes back together in ways I never expected. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and whether you've ever discovered something that changed your entire understanding of your life. I read every single comment. Now let's continue. The first 5 years of my marriage were fine. Not great. Not terrible. Fine. Nathan worked long hours. I worked long hours. We passed each other in the kitchen, slept in the same bed, shared our lives in the superficial way that busy couples do. Then I got pregnant with Owen. Everything changed when I got pregnant. Nathan suddenly had opinions about my career. It was too stressful, he said. The commute was too long. The hours were too demanding. How could I possibly be a good mother while working 50-hour weeks at an agency that didn't appreciate me? I pushed back at first. I loved my job. I was good at it. I had just been promoted to senior designer, and there was talk of making me creative director within a few years, but Nathan was persistent and persuasive, and slowly, incrementally, he wore me down. Think about the baby, he said. Think about what's best for our family. I make enough money for both of us. Why are you so determined to prove something? What are you trying to prove? I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted to keep working. But somehow, wanting to keep working became evidence of selfishness, of bad priorities, of not caring enough about my unborn child. I quit my job when I was 7 months pregnant. Nathan said we'd revisit the issue once the baby was older, once things settled down, once it made sense for me to go back to work. That day never came. Owen was born healthy and beautiful, with Nathan's eyes and my mother's smile. I fell in love with him instantly, completely, in the way that new mothers do. And suddenly, staying home didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like a gift. I got to watch my son grow, to be there for every milestone, to build the kind of close relationship my own working mother hadn't been able to have with me. 2 years later, Emma was born. Same story, same love, same complete absorption in motherhood. I didn't notice that I'd stopped being Rosemary Chen, graphic designer with a career and ambitions and a sense of self. I'd become Mrs. Price, Nathan's wife, Owen, and Emma's mother. A supporting character in everyone else's story. Nathan liked it that way. I understand that now. He had systematically removed everything that made me independent, everything that gave me power, everything that might have allowed me to leave if I ever wanted to. Not that I wanted to. Not yet. The problems started small. They always do. Nathan began criticizing my housekeeping. The dishes weren't done the right way. The laundry was folded wrong. The meals I cooked weren't as good as his mother's. Little comments delivered with a smile, framed as helpful suggestions rather than attacks. I tried harder, cleaned more thoroughly, folded more precisely, took cooking classes. Nothing was ever good enough. The criticism expanded. I was gaining weight from pregnancy that I hadn't lost. My hair looked tired. I wasn't keeping up with current events. I wasn't interesting to talk to anymore. What had happened to the bright, ambitious woman he'd marry? I didn't know. I didn't know where she'd gone. I just knew that I felt smaller every day, more apologetic, more desperate to please a man who seemed perpetually disappointed in me. By the time the children were in school, I was a shell. I cooked, I cleaned, I drove to activities and playdates and doctor's appointments. I managed our household with mechanical efficiency while my husband told anyone who would listen what a burden I was. She doesn't work, he'd say at parties, with a laugh that invited others to share his amusement. She just stays home all day. Must be nice. I wanted to go back to work by then, desperately. But years out of the industry had made my skills obsolete, and Nathan refused to pay for childcare that would allow me to take an entry-level position. If you're going to work, you need to make enough to cover the costs, he said. Otherwise, what's the point? He knew I couldn't make enough. He had engineered the situation specifically so I couldn't make enough. And so I stayed home, isolated and dependent, exactly where he wanted me. The affair started when Owen was 8 and Emma was 6. Maybe it started earlier. I'll never know for certain. But that was when I first found evidence, a receipt for a hotel in the city that Nathan claimed he'd never visited. I confronted him. He denied everything. He turned it around on me, accused me of being paranoid, jealous, irrational. He said the receipt must have been from a work event. He said I was letting my insecurities destroy our marriage. I believed him, or at least, I chose to believe him, because the alternative was too frightening to contemplate. Without Nathan, I had nothing. No income, no job skills, no friends, since he'd driven them all away. No relationship with my family, since he'd created distance there too. I had nowhere to go. So I stayed, and I pretended I believed his lies. The woman was a colleague of his, younger of course, 28 to my 39. Her name was Brittany, and she had blonde hair and a business degree and absolutely no respect for the institution of marriage or the family she was helping to destroy. I learned her name when Nathan decided to stop hiding. When he decided that I was so beaten down, so thoroughly controlled, that he could do whatever he wanted without consequence. He was right. He could do whatever he wanted. And for 2 more years, he did. Then his mother died. Nathan's mother, Margaret, had never liked me. The feeling was mutual. But I'd always been polite. She was a critical, controlling woman who had raised her son to believe he was superior to everyone around him, especially women. When she died of a heart attack at 73, Nathan grieved performatively, while I felt a secret relief that I'm still ashamed of. But Margaret's death changed the power dynamics in our marriage. Nathan inherited money, a substantial amount, and suddenly he didn't need my compliance anymore. He didn't need to maintain the facade of a happy marriage. He didn't need me at all. I want a divorce, he said, 3 months after his mother's funeral. I'm in love with Brittany. I want to marry her. I want us to be a family. I should have felt relieved. I should have welcomed the opportunity to escape. But after 13 years of systematic abuse, I was so broken that his announcement felt like a death sentence. What about the children? I managed. He smiled, and there was nothing kind in it. They'll stay with me. You're not fit to raise them. Everyone knows that. Everyone knew nothing of the sort. But Nathan had been building his case for years. The doctors he'd taken the children to, claiming I was neglecting their health. The teachers he'd spoken with, expressing concern about my mental stability. The neighbors he'd confided in, painting a picture of a wife who was falling apart while he heroically held the family together. He had documentation. He had witnesses. He had a story that everyone believed because he told it so convincingly. I had nothing. No job, no income, no support network, no evidence of his affair or his abuse, nothing but my word against his. And his word had been polished to a shine, while mine had been ground down to dust. The divorce was swift and brutal. Nathan got the house, claiming it was purchased with his income and I had contributed nothing. He got the cars, using the same logic. He got custody of Owen and Emma, based on testimony from experts who believed his lies about my mental health and parenting capabilities. I got visitation every other weekend. I got $432 in my checking account and a suitcase of clothes. I got the privilege of watching my children drive away with their father and his pregnant girlfriend, who was already moving into the house where I had raised them. Brittany was pregnant with Nathan's child, the family he'd always wanted, assembled from the wreckage of the family he'd destroyed. I stood on the sidewalk outside the courthouse and watched them go, and I felt something inside me finally break. Not my heart, that had been broken for years. Something deeper, something fundamental, some part of me that had still believed in justice, in fairness, in the idea that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad ones. That part died on the courthouse steps, and I thought I would never get it back. If you're still with me, hit that like button right now, because what happens next is where everything changed. I want you to see how transformation is possible, even when you've lost everything. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt as hopeless as I felt in that moment. And then keep watching. I moved into a studio apartment above a dry cleaner. The rent was $600 a month, which I could barely afford with the meager alimony the court had awarded me, alimony that Nathan was already fighting to reduce. The apartment was small and shabby. The carpet was stained. The windows didn't close properly. The smell of cleaning chemicals drifted up from below, invading my sleep and my waking hours, but it was mine. The first thing that had been truly mine in 16 years. I lived there for 6 months before I remembered the storage unit. It happened by accident. I was going through the few possessions I'd managed to take from my marriage, trying to find something to sell so I could make rent. I opened my grandmother's jewelry box, looking for anything that might be valuable, and there it was. The key, small, brass, unremarkable, sitting exactly where I'd put it 17 years earlier, on my wedding day. Keep this safe, my grandmother had said. Don't tell your husband about it. Someday you might need it. Someday had arrived. It took me 2 days to find the storage facility. I had to go through old papers, bank statements, anything that might tell me where my grandmother had been paying rent. Finally, I found a receipt in a folder I'd inherited from her estate, the estate Nathan had handled, the estate he'd told me was worthless. The receipt was for Unit 247 at Store Safe Facility on Route 9, $62 a month, paid automatically from an account I hadn't known existed. I drove there on a Tuesday morning, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't know what I was going to find. Maybe nothing. Maybe boxes of old clothes and broken furniture. Maybe just more disappointment in a life that had been full of disappointments. But my grandmother had told me to remember. She had told me I might need it. And my grandmother had never been wrong about anything important. The storage unit was dusty and cramped, stacked floor to ceiling with boxes. I started opening them methodically, documenting everything with my phone camera, not knowing what I was looking at but knowing somehow that it mattered. The coins were first, then the stamps, then the paintings. By the time I reached the 4th box, the one with the documents, I was hyperventilating. Not from fear, from hope, from the sudden overwhelming realization that my grandmother had left me a lifeline, and I was just now reaching out to grab it. The stock certificates alone were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Blue chip companies purchased decades ago when shares cost pennies compared to their current value. The bonds had matured and been rolled over, accruing value for years. The investment records showed a portfolio that had been carefully managed by a financial advisor my grandmother had trusted, an advisor who had been waiting to hear from me for 11 years. His name was Gregory Banks. I found his card in the document box, along with a letter my grandmother had written explaining everything. Dear Rosemary, the letter began. If you're reading this, it means you finally needed to open the storage unit. I'm sorry for whatever brought you here, but I'm not sorry for leaving you this gift. I never told anyone about my wealth. Not your mother, not your father, not anyone. I saw too many families destroyed by money, too many relationships poisoned by inheritance. I wanted to live simply and die simply, and I wanted to leave everything to you. Why you? Because you were always my favorite. Because you have your grandfather's spirit, even if you've forgotten it. Because I saw something in you that made me believe you would use this wisely. There's more in the unit than what you'll find in the boxes. Gregory Banks has been managing my investments for 30 years. He has instructions to transfer everything to you when you contact him. He's been waiting. He knows you would come when you were ready. Be careful who you trust, Rosemary. Be careful who you tell about this. Money changes people, and not always for the better. But also remember that money is just a tool. It can build or destroy. It can liberate or imprison. Choose to build. Choose to be free. I love you, granddaughter. I always have. Grandma Liu, I sat in that storage unit and cried for an hour. Cried for my grandmother, who I'd never properly thanked for believing in me. Cried for myself, for the years I'd lost to Nathan's manipulation. Cried for my children, who I might finally have a chance to get back. Then I dried my tears, locked the unit, and drove home to call Gregory Banks. Gregory was 81 years old, still working, still sharp as a tack. He sounded genuinely delighted to hear from me. I've been waiting, Mrs. Chen, he said. Your grandmother always said you'd call eventually. I'm glad it finally happened. How much? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How much did she leave me? There was a pause while he checked his records. Then, at current market value, including the contents of the storage unit and the investment portfolio I've been managing, approximately $6.4 million. I almost dropped the phone. $6.4 million. I had been living above a dry cleaner, rationing my groceries, wondering if I could afford to keep the heat on through winter, and I had $6.4 million. The logistics took time. Nothing moves quickly when that much money is involved. But Gregory was patient and thorough, and within 2 months, everything had been transferred to accounts in my name. Accounts Nathan didn't know about. Accounts nobody knew about except me and my grandmother's trusted advisor. I didn't quit my apartment. Not yet. I didn't change my lifestyle or buy new clothes or do anything that might signal my changed circumstances. Because I had learned something important during my marriage to Nathan. Information is power. And the element of surprise is worth more than any amount of money. Nathan thought he had won. He thought I was broken and defeated and no threat to him. He thought he could continue reducing my alimony, limiting my visitation, slowly erasing me from my children's lives. He had no idea what was coming. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. The best family law attorney in the state. Her name was Victoria Chen, no relation, and she had a reputation for destroying overconfident ex-husbands in court. When I told her my story, when I showed her the evidence I'd been quietly gathering for months, she smiled the way a predator smiles when it spots wounded prey. Mrs. Chen, she said, your ex-husband made a lot of mistakes. The biggest one was assuming you would never fight back. I'm ready to fight now, I said. Then let's begin. Victoria and I spent 3 months building our case. We hired private investigators who documented Nathan's affair, which had begun years before he'd claimed. We obtained financial records showing he had hidden assets during our divorce. We gathered testimony from neighbors and teachers and doctors who, when properly questioned, admitted that Nathan had been the one making complaints, not receiving them. The picture that emerged was devastating. Nathan had systematically lied during our divorce proceedings. He had concealed income and assets. He had manipulated witnesses and manufactured evidence. He had committed fraud upon the court, which is exactly as serious as it sounds. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source, Brittany. Nathan's affair partner, now wife, the woman who had helped destroy my marriage, turned out to be deeply unhappy. Nathan had treated her the same way he'd treated me, controlling and criticizing and isolating her from everyone she loved. She had discovered she was just the latest in a long line of women he'd used and discarded. She had also discovered that Nathan was already having an affair with someone else. When Victoria approached her, carefully and confidentially, Brittany was ready to talk. She provided emails, text messages, financial records that Nathan had kept from our divorce, evidence of every lie he had told, every asset he had hidden, every manipulation he had employed to steal my children and my life. The woman who had helped take everything from me became the key to getting it all back. The motion to modify custody was filed on a Monday morning. Nathan received the documents at his office, surrounded by colleagues who watched his face go pale as he read through page after page of accusations. He called me that night, for the first time since the divorce was finalized. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "Where did you get a lawyer? You can't afford a lawyer." "There's a lot you don't know about me, Nathan," I said calmly. "There's a lot you never bothered to learn. This is harassment. I'll have you arrested. I'll make sure you never see those kids again." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "You can try. I'll see you in court. If you're still watching, subscribe right now. Because the courtroom scene is coming, and I want you here for every moment of Nathan finally getting what he deserves. Tell me in the comments what you think is going to happen. Then keep watching." The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in November. Cold outside, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. But inside the courtroom, I felt nothing but warmth. Nathan arrived with his attorney, a man named Bradley Marcus, who had represented him during our divorce. Bradley looked confident. Nathan looked smug. They had beaten me before. They expected to beat me again. They had no idea what was coming. Victoria presented our case methodically, devastatingly. She started with the financial fraud, showing how Nathan had concealed income and assets during our divorce. She presented bank records he'd thought were hidden, investment accounts he'd thought were secret, a pattern of deception so thorough it made the judge's eyebrows climb toward his hairline. Then she moved to the custody fraud, the manufactured complaints, the coach testimony, the systematic campaign to paint me as an unfit mother when, in fact, I had been the primary caregiver for our children their entire lives. She called witnesses, neighbors who had seen Nathan coming and going at odd hours while I stayed home with the kids, teachers who remembered me at every parent-teacher conference while Nathan rarely showed up, doctors who admitted under oath that Nathan had been the one expressing concerns about my mental health, concerns that were never substantiated by any professional evaluation. And then she called Brittany. Nathan's face when his wife took the stand against him was something I will treasure forever. The color drained from his cheeks. His confident posture crumbled. He started whispering urgently to Bradley, who was frantically flipping through notes, looking for some way to object. There was nothing to object to. Brittany was telling the truth, and the truth was devastating. She testified about the affair, about how Nathan had pursued her while still married to me, telling her I was mentally unstable, that our marriage was already over in all but name, about how he had promised her a better life, a life without me, a life where they would be a happy family. She testified about what happened after they married, about how Nathan had changed, become controlling and critical, exactly as he had been with me, about how she had discovered she was just the latest version of a pattern that had been repeating his entire adult life. And she testified about the other woman, the one Nathan was currently sleeping with, the one he had been sleeping with since before their first anniversary, the one Brittany had discovered when she found hotel receipts, just as I had discovered Brittany years before. By the time Victoria finished her examination, Nathan looked like a man watching his own execution. His attorney had stopped trying to object. The judge was looking at Nathan with unconcealed disgust. "Mr. Price," the judge said finally, "the evidence presented here today suggests a pattern of fraud and manipulation that this court takes very seriously. You deliberately misrepresented your finances during your divorce. You manufactured evidence to gain custody of your children, and you have continued to engage in deceptive behavior throughout your current marriage." Nathan stood up, his voice desperate. "Your Honor, this is all lies. My ex-wife is mentally unstable. She's making all of this up because she's bitter about the divorce." The judge shook his head. "Mr. Price, the evidence is overwhelming. Bank records don't lie. Your own wife just testified against you. Multiple witnesses have corroborated the picture of a man who systematically deceives everyone around him." He shuffled papers on his bench. "I am reversing the custody determination from your original divorce. Primary custody of Owen and Emma Price is hereby awarded to their mother, Rosemary Chen. Mr. Price will have supervised visitation every other weekend, supervised, because he couldn't be trusted with his own children. Additionally," the judge continued, "I am ordering a review of the original divorce settlement in light of the evidence of financial fraud. Mrs. Chen is entitled to a fair division of marital assets, including assets that were concealed during the original proceedings." Nathan's face had gone from pale to red. He was shaking with rage. "Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential criminal charges. Fraud upon the court is a serious matter, Mr. Price. You may be facing consequences beyond what this family court can impose. Criminal charges. Nathan might go to prison for what he'd done. I sat at my table, Victoria beside me, and I felt something unfamiliar. It took me a moment to recognize it. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The kind I hadn't felt in almost decades. My children were coming home. My children, who I'd been allowed to see only every other weekend for months, who had been told lies about me by their father, who had been slowly turned against me by a man who used everyone around him. They were coming home. The aftermath of the court decision unfolded over the following months. Nathan was indeed charged with fraud. He pleaded guilty to reduced charges and received 2 years of probation plus significant financial penalties. His reputation in the community, carefully cultivated over years, was destroyed. The neighbors who had pitied him now crossed the street to avoid him. The revised divorce settlement awarded me 60% of the marital assets, including the house. I chose to sell it. There were too many bad memories there, too many years of pain soaked into the walls. I used the money to buy a new house, a fresh start, a place where my children and I could build something better. Owen and Emma struggled at first. They had been told so many lies about me, believed so many of their father's manipulations. But children are resilient, and they are also perceptive. Once they were out from under Nathan's influence, they began to see the truth. It took time. Therapy helped. Family counseling helped. But eventually, we became a family again. A real family, built on love and honesty instead of control and fear. Brittany divorced Nathan 6 months after the hearing. She reached out to me tentatively to apologize for her role in destroying my marriage. I didn't want to forgive her. For a long time, I couldn't. She had participated in my destruction, willingly and enthusiastically. She had moved into my house, slept in my bed, mothered my children, while I lived above a dry cleaner. But I kept thinking about what my grandmother had written. Money is just a tool. It can build or destroy. It can liberate or imprison. Bitterness was like that too. I could hold on to my anger toward Brittany, nurse it, let it define me. Or I could choose to let it go. I chose to let it go, not for her sake, for mine. We're not friends, Brittany and I. We probably never will be. But we've reached a kind of peace. She made terrible choices, and she's living with the consequences. I don't need to add to her suffering. Nathan, on the other hand, I feel no compulsion to forgive. Some things are unforgivable. Some people don't deserve the grace of forgiveness. And some lessons only stick when there are consequences. Nathan lost everything. His house, his money, his reputation, his second marriage, his relationship with his children who saw through his lies and chose to limit their contact with him. Last I heard, he was living in a small apartment on the other side of town, working a job far below his previous station. His girlfriend, the one Brittany had discovered, had left him when the money ran out. He was alone, which was exactly what he deserved. I don't feel sorry for him. I don't feel anything for him. He's simply a chapter in my life that's over. A lesson I had to learn the hard way, a cautionary tale about trusting the wrong person. The money my grandmother left me changed my life, but not in the ways you might expect. I didn't buy a mansion or a sports car or take elaborate vacations. I invested most of it, ensuring my children's futures would be secure regardless of what happened to me. I bought a comfortable house in a good neighborhood. I donated to causes I believed in. I lived carefully, remembering my grandmother's advice about how money can corrupt. But I also allowed myself some joy. A trip to Paris, which I'd always dreamed of. A new wardrobe. Clothes that made me feel like myself again. Art classes, reconnecting with the creativity I'd abandoned when I quit my design career. And eventually, I went back to work. Not because I needed the money, but because I needed to be Rosemary Chen again. I needed to have something that was mine, built by my own efforts, defined by my own choices. I started a design firm specializing in branding for women-owned businesses. Small at first, just me and a laptop and ideas I'd been hoarding for years. But it grew, word spread, clients came. 5 years after my divorce, I employ 12 people and have clients across the country. I've built something real, something that matters, something that nobody can take from me. My grandmother would be proud. I hope she knows, wherever she is, that I finally found my spirit again. That I finally became the person she always believed I could be. There's one more thing I want to tell you, because I think it matters. The storage unit key wasn't magic. The money wasn't the thing that saved me. What saved me was remembering that I had value, that I was worth fighting for, that the person Nathan had told me I was, weak and worthless and dependent, was a lie designed to keep me under control. The money gave me options. It gave me the ability to hire good lawyers and fight for my children. But the decision to fight, the courage to stand up after being knocked down for so many years, that came from somewhere inside me. Somewhere that Nathan had tried to destroy but never quite managed to reach. My grandmother saw that place in me before I saw it in myself. She left me the key because she knew someday I would need it. Not just the key to the storage unit, the key to understanding my own worth. Keep this safe, she'd said. Someday you might need it. She was right. I needed it. And when I finally used it, everything changed. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. I want you to know something. Whatever you're going through right now, whatever someone has taken from you or tried to convince you that you are, it's not the end of your story. There's still time. There's still hope. There's still a version of your life waiting to be claimed. You might not have a grandmother who left you millions of dollars in a storage unit. Most people don't. But you have something more valuable than money. You have yourself, your spirit, your ability to choose who you want to be and who you refuse to remain. My ex took the house, the cars, and the kids. He took everything I thought mattered and left me with nothing. But he didn't check what was in the storage unit. He didn't know about my grandmother's gift. He didn't understand that the woman he dismissed as worthless was actually the heir to everything she needed to destroy him. And now I have it all back. My children, my identity, my life. If I can do it, you can do it too. Whatever has been taken from you, whatever you think you've lost forever, there's still a way forward. There's still a key waiting to be found. You just have to remember where to look. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now. You're going to love what happens next. I'll see you in the next one.